one time, DSLRs ruled mainstream photography, but the mainstream's moved on. Is it time to consider the DSLR the newest member of the alternative photography club? Can a DSLR be an alt camera? Since the 1960s, single-lens-reflex cameras shooting 35mm film were the definition of mainstream camera. They displaced nearly every other camera style and film format. When digital replaced film in the early 2000s, the pinnacle of the digital revolution was the digital SLR, fitting a digital sensor into SLR cameras. And it brought instant digital imaging to press, sports, portrait, and amateur photographers who wanted a digital camera that was as powerful and flexible as their film SLR had been. The DSLR became the definition of mainstream photography for nearly 2 decades, and I never imagined describing a DSLR as an alt camera. While Olympus, Panasonic, and Fujifilm demonstrated the potential of mirrorless cameras, DSLRs remained the mainstream choice until, let's say, 2018, when Canon and Nikon embraced mirrorless with the R and Z mounts. While mirrorless skeptics remain, the bulk of the photography world moved with Nikon and Canon. A new photographer asking online whether they should buy a mirrorless or a DSLR camera will hear a resounding consensus. Buy mirrorless or you'll regret it. That's how the mainstream works, reinforcing the dominant market. And mirrorless is the mainstream. So here's the proposal. DSLRs are now alt cameras. Now that the mainstream has moved on, DSLRs are the newest members of the Alternative Photography Club. They've joined the ranks of view cameras, rangefinder cameras, digital point-and-shoots, and film cameras of all vintages as an alternative choice to what everyone else is shooting. Like any alternative camera, DSLRs live on as productive, useful tools for photographers who choose to use them. DSLRs are still able to make amazing photographs, and DSLRs didn't stop working the day that mirrorless cameras hit the mainstream. The camera mainstream has changed before, of course. The medium has changed from glass plates to flexible film, from roll film to miniature 35mm, from 35mm film to digital. Mainstream cameras have changed from composing on a piece of ground glass to using viewfinders, from using rangefinders to SLRs with through-the-lens viewfinding. While fashions have changed and the mainstream had good reason to embrace the latest technology, it didn't render the older cameras obsolete. In fact, some photographers continue to use these obsolete cameras and formats because it suits the photographs they want to create. That's the spirit of alternative photography and of alt cameras. DSLRs have now joined that club. And with the DSLR retiring from the mainstream, maybe some of the pressure is off for them to be the ultimate do-everything camera. They can be appreciated for their strengths, like the pleasure of seeing the world unfiltered through the lens that actually captures the picture, without having the pressure to have the highest frame rate, bleeding-edge autofocus performance, or 8K cinema quality video. Like all alternative cameras, there are some really cool reasons why you might want to use a DSLR. One of those reasons might be a unique rendering. The newest DSLRs, of course, use modern CMOS sensors, often sharing similar sensors to their mirrorless successors. But online, there's a lot of talk about the unique look of older sensor generations. Vintage DSLRs use vintage sensors, so you might seek out the unique look of a CCD sensor, or a sensor made by Kodak, or a Fuji Super CCD sensor. Inevitably, nostalgia enters the discussion. People respond to using tools that were indefinably cool when they were younger. And I've seen people drooling over the 2010s wedding photographer aesthetic, which the Nikon D800 is a perfect example of. It's all about equipment that you couldn't afford when you were younger. If you remember how absolutely cool the Nikon D3 seemed when it was introduced, picking one up in 2026 might be a way to connect back to that time. And you can enjoy a best-in-class experience that previously was just reserved for working professionals. The other reason you might be looking at DSLRs is because you're bargain hunting. Bargain hunters have noticed DSLRs, which continue to produce professional-looking images, even though they're being sold off at a loss by photographers who are jettisoning their old gear to buy into mirrorless systems. Top-tier DSLRs were and are world-class tools with amazing image quality. Those qualities haven't diminished with time, especially if you're buying into a DSLR from the last decade. And keeping one of those DSLRs running can also be a bargain. Spare parts, batteries, and accessories can be found easily, and there's lots of them for the most popular DSLR models. Another reason to embrace the DSLR is the optical viewfinder experience. Some photographers really respond to the single-lens-reflex shooting experience, and they don't want to give it up. Like how rangefinder shooters prefer seeing the world directly through their viewfinder window, SLR shooters get to experience the light of the scene directly with their own eye with no lag. But the advantage of SLR cameras over rangefinders is the ability to see the scene through the lens that will capture the picture itself. You see the scene as it is rendered by the lens. You see if there's flare in the shot. You see where focus is set. You can stop down the lens and see the impact on the depth of focus. The combination of lag-free optical viewing with what you see is what you get is a special experience that some photographers simply prefer. The direct optical viewfinder experience forms the basis of Pentax's commitment to the DSLR. Pentax is the last major camera maker to focus on DSLRs, and they've stated their intention to continue with SLR technology and to not shift to mirrorless. Pentax's stated commitment to the SLR is very similar to Leica's commitment to the rangefinder. While the audience for DSLRs may be smaller than the mainstream mirrorless market, Pentax believes that some photographers will choose the SLR because of the experience it gives the photographer. So what are your choices for embracing the DSLR? Honestly, this is an extraordinary moment for new DSLR shooters. You have so many choices. You can buy new from a company like Pentax, who makes rugged DSLRs with amazing image quality. They have stated their commitment to the optical viewfinder, similar to Leica's commitment to the rangefinder. They've even introduced a dedicated black and white DSLR, carving out a completely singular niche in the camera world. Top-tier DSLRs are still available brand new from Nikon and Canon. While we won't see another flagship DSLR from those companies, and they're discontinuing lenses from their DSLR lineups, the existing cameras are powerful, useful tools, and there are thousands of used lenses available. Even when you're buying new, substantial price reductions make these cameras more accessible than ever. Over the past year, I've seen the flagship Nikon D850 discounted by a third off its regular price, and it's a camera that holds its own against the top tier of mirrorless cameras. Your other option is to buy used. On the used market, recent generation DSLRs with high megapixel counts and powerful autofocus systems are selling relatively cheaply as the mainstream market sells off their DSLRs to replace them with mirrorless cameras. This is supply and demand. Millions of DSLRs were sold. They were the mainstream. That's a lot of used cameras being put on the market at the same time people are looking to mirrorless as the mainstream choice. The result is some amazing prices, similar to what happened when film cameras flooded the used market in the rush to digital. But prices won't always be low. Like what happened with film cameras, there are a finite number of DSLR cameras in the world. There aren't very many new ones being made, and some DSLR cameras are already seeing increased demand, and prices are seeing a resurgence on some models. I've noticed the prices creep up on cameras like the D700 and the Nikon DF as nostalgia and online discussions drive up demand. We have to talk about lens choices. because buying a DSLR means buying an interchangeable lens camera. If you're buying a Pentax DSLR, you get access to Pentax's modest but very well regarded line of lenses, available brand new or used. And this includes the legendary Pentax limited lenses, which honestly might be reason enough to choose a Pentax camera. It also gives you access to thousands of lenses made for the Pentax K-mount or M42 screw mounts over the past half century. Nikon and Canon's move to mirrorless and the availability of really high quality mirrorless lenses has pushed some photographers to sell off their Nikon F and Canon EF mount lenses. This has created the opportunity to purchase high performance lenses at unthinkable bargain prices. But Nikon F-mount AFS lenses and Canon EF lenses can also be adapted without any compromises on a matching Nikon Z or Canon R camera. So lenses you might purchase to use on a DSLR could be equally useful if you also shoot mirrorless or you're thinking about it in the future. That means you could outfit a DSLR kit and not have to worry about buying into an orphaned lens system. So if you're looking to explore DSLR photography, consider whether you have or might purchase a mirrorless camera to put in the mix. For Canon R users, EF lenses are a great option. And what about film? You may be considering film as part of your alt camera journey, and good DSLR lenses can also be good lenses for film SLRs, opening the gateway to a whole other world of alternative photography. Careful choice of lens and camera body can even allow you to use your lenses across all three generations: a film SLR, a DSLR, and a mirrorless camera. The mainstream has moved on. Mirrorless is king. Shooting with a DSLR is now a conscious choice. The SLR aficionado is now making an alternative choice to purchase brand new top tier equipment from Pentax, Nikon, or Canon, or to find bargains on used cameras and lenses. Some folks continue to shoot DSLR regardless of its newfound status as an alternative photography format. Professional photographers with substantial investments and no compelling reason to change their tools, and amateur photographers who enjoy their cameras and are not being held back in any way by SLR technology. But the DSLR is also being embraced by photographers looking for something different. A direct connection with the photons entering their lens and viewfinder. A vintage look from classic sensors and legacy lenses. Or savvy photographers who recognize that they can have access to a whole library of world-class lenses and cameras at unbeatable prices. Welcome, DSLR, to the Alt Camera Club.